Hey, it's Arrow, and this is Frag. Out here on this transition walk, that's where we do our defragging, our vocal defragging. But I also am a defragger in a journal, so it's two different places. Defragging is asking questions and then questioning the answers. Can you handle the answers? I always think of my father when I defrag, and the reason why is because I don't think my father knew who he was. And he had every right to think like that, because at the age of 18, he was in Germany fighting in World War II. And according to him, through my entire life, I never heard the stories, but on his final moments, he openly admitted to my sister that his anger was based on one thing: the day that his friend was killed in that hole. And he said, I never got over it. And my sister and I have talked about that so much. And it's one of those things that if we can do whatever we can to get people to defrag, ask the questions, question the answers. This is defrag. Today, very, very heavy subject, very heavy. And it does affect a lot of people because people like people. We like to hang out with people. We like hanging out with every people. Doesn't matter what you're wearing as a label, as a boss or as an employee. I don't look at radio as being a real world. That's a childhood dream. That's living out your thoughts and your patterns and your habits as an entertainer. So getting a real job in customer service, that meant I had to work with real people in the way of managers and co-workers and people that come in from the corporate offices and things. And you just sit there and you go, wow, I missed all of this and I can't go back and get it back. Well, one of my managers was actually one of my students at the School of Broadcasting. He had big dreams just like I did, and his big dreams turned into a nightmare. And that's what radio does. A lot of people go through a lot of radio nightmares. And so he and I have always been great friends. And that was the two radio guys, great friends. We shared a lot of stories. We listened to each other on our journeys and travels. Well, one day in 2021, we're talking on the phone, and he says, man, you make it sound great where you're at that grocery store. I said, can I tell you why it is great? Because people are real. I mean, as a radio jock, you just imagine people exist. But they're right here in front of you. You would like it. Well, he applied for a job, but I didn't realize that he was going to apply for a managerial job. Well, then again, I wasn't shocked because he was a manager at Taco Bell for several years and at Five Guys and other businesses. So seeing him in that managerial position changed things. I use that word change. What's up? How can two great radio friends face change? Well, here's what it was, is that as a manager, that meant that he was now my boss. And for all of those years, it went from I was his instructor, I was his coach, I was his motivator, and now he was the boss. Well, I like to be friendly with everybody, bosses included. Well, not really. I always try to shy away from them because their world is none of my business. I don't want to know their world. And so what's happened for the past year or so is that this guy and I have created a gap. And I just had the conversation with him today, and I had to do some research on this because you know me, when things like this happen, I've got to go in and I've got to figure out a plan and a solution. The gap is that I still want to be friends. I still talk to him as a friend. You try to do things as a friend, you laugh as a friend when you're in the store together. You say things to each other like friends do. And it's things that, cross the line, but that's what friends do. But you have to remember that in the end, he's still a manager. He's still the boss. And so I wrote to him last night in a text message. And I told him, I said, I don't need your corporate answer, but I just think you should know that something major is about to happen and you should be prepared for it. Well, he wrote to me this morning and said, why do you talk to me like this? And I had to explain to him. I had to put out there the picture. There's a gap. There's a huge gap. That there are days when you being a manager gets in the way of being a friend. And I needed to talk to the friend last night and telling you that I don't need your corporate stuff was my way of setting up the conversation. Well, it offended him. But we talked it out. We really did. But I had to do some research, and the research is based on, should managers and business leaders be friends with everyday people? And there's 2 points of direction on this. Some people believe that, yes, it builds a better, stronger team for all. Not just the 2 people, the friend and the manager, but for all. Because people live off that camaraderie because they want to be a part of it. But at the same time, that camaraderie can turn people off, other coworkers off, because they're not getting what they got that you've got. The positive is that the friendship is a solid foundation. The negative is that it can get in the way of the friendship, which was the case last night. But then I had the opportunity to reflect, and it's a situation that's been building up for a while. Because as a leader in broadcasting, I knew what team building was all about, because I surrounded myself with people who wanted to be team leaders. And so when I was seeing things on our floor and I wasn't seeing the right people in the right positions, I began vocalizing and saying, "You're doing it wrong." Uh-oh. Now the employee is telling the manager that he's doing it wrong. And so the manager is starting to get a little edgy as well about, "Don't tell me how to do my job." Well, I'm into team building, and I believe that every person on the team should be a worker of all 4 corners of the building. There shouldn't be just one person that does one thing when everybody has the opportunity to do all things. That's the way that I led in radio, is that you had to become a part of all 4 corners, because that's how valuable I wanted the upper echelon to find their teams. I didn't want them to think, well, let's get rid of this person because all they do is this. Well, let's get back to that research. Once again, the good is that some people believe that our friendship is what creates a solid foundation, and you can build upon it and reach into areas that you couldn't do if we were 2 completely different people. I understand that part of it. But the negative part of this entire journey is the fact that anything personal that has to do with a friendship versus a boss is what's creating the poison. Where looking at him and saying, "I don't like the way you're running this floor," that's not a good idea. Not a good idea, because it's created that gap. Well, I made that gap visible in a conversation today, and it's something that we're going to be working on. But that's what you need to do when whatever department you're running, is that you've got to work together and make sure that the friendship doesn't get in the way of the boss and the employee, nor can the boss get in the way of the employee. Because my attitude, maybe it's my ego, I'll give it that, I'll tell you, I'll call you out. I'll sit there and say, look, this is not the way we're going to do it. Because as a team leader in my division, this is the way we do things. Because once they're out of the store at a certain time, now it becomes my floor. And I know how I run my floor. So I strongly suggest many times that please put these players in positions where we need to have every bit of their energy utilized in all 4 corners of the building. But you know how the boss is. Don't tell me how to run my floor. And even with the email last night, where I said, I don't need your corporate answer on this one. And he felt a little hurt this morning because I made such a comment like that. So in your own world, as we defrag this, do you want a relationship, a friendship, an ongoing friendship with your boss? With those that make big decisions that you know in the long run are going to affect you? Do you want that friendship? Especially since this guy and I have been friends for nearly 15 years, and then all of a sudden we're working together, and that friendship has taken a sudden shift. How do you protect the leadership role of the manager and the friendship role at the same time? Is it feasibly possible? So you've got to ask the questions, and then you got to question the answers. Is it important to have this relationship. Yes, it is very important for me to have this relationship with this guy because he has been with me since day one of the podcasting. He's been with me since day one of the internet radio stations that we created. We've done so much in radio. Now, the goal is to do even more at a grocery store. Because we had those early days of training to build things in radio. Why aren't we using the same energy to make our store greater than what it's ever been? Working together. And even though that position, that label, is something that he's carrying in, the question is, can he lower himself down to what we used to do as martial artists? One of the big rules. Oh, big whoop-de-doo-doo. You're a third-degree black belt. Absolutely right. Big whoop-de-doo-doo. Because when it comes to training other black belts, man, I start with the white belt. And when I work with a white belt, I don't have a black belt attitude. I'm thinking like a white belt because I know where they are. I have lived that lifestyle and I don't want to scare them away. But would I develop a friendship with a white belt? Sure I did. I didn't have a drinking buddy. I didn't have anything like that. I wasn't interested in that. But as long as we were in that class, I would have a friendship conversation. Out on the street, sure, I would have a conversation. But it wouldn't be in the way of saying, hey, come on over and let's watch the Super Bowl. That doesn't happen. I've never been that personality. So the thing is that you've got to be what type of leader? Ask the question, who do you want to be as a leader? More importantly, who do you want to be as an employee? And we've talked about this many times. I don't walk into that store in a great mood, but I know that my attitude and the energy that I carry, if I go in there with a negative-ass attitude, they're going to pick up on it, and now I've screwed up their day. The guests, my coworkers, it's all in the attitude. But as you build that attitude, and you have to wear those stupid labels, there's something to it when I say that friendship is always greater than a business leader. I understand that you have to have the business leaders, but you also have to have the friendship. I've been married for 30 years. For 30 years, I've always called my wife my best friend. She and I have had that conversation for 30 years. Look, you're my best friend first, and I will always introduce you as such. By the way, if it sounds like I'm winded right now, one day I invite you to come to this forest in South Charlotte, North Carolina, and you got to walk this hill with me. It's called Heartbreak Hill. Oh my God. I've been going up and down this hill for 30 years, and it still kicks my ass. It doesn't matter how many times a day I come up and down this hill. But you know, it's that friendship that I have with myself. Out here, I'm a manager, I'm a leader. When I get inside the soul, that's my friend. What about you? Ask the questions. Question the answers. I'm Arrow, and that's Defrag.